And the reason I'm a fan is that we've got a real problem in that we have huge political inequality as a consequence of inequality in turnout. So the oldest demographic group, so over 65s, are voting about 76% of the last election. It's nearly twice as much as the 18 to 24-year-olds, it's 44%, and latest polling suggests that that might dip down to 37% at this election. And the problem is that, therefore, politicians are more interested in serving the interests of the demographic who vote more because they're interested in winning their votes and keeping their votes. And therefore what's happening is that young people are getting marginalised and their interests aren't being served as they should be. And I think that something drastic needs to happen.
And is a suggestion that's a vicious circle because
exactly, because if you feel that you're not getting spoken to or paid attention to by politicians, then you're less likely to vote, and then it just continues and continues. And that's why I think you require a really radical solution like compulsory voting.
Now, I presume, Dore McNoon-Tariq and Michael Yip, you are both going to vote. But what do you think about this idea of actually being forced to vote, Dore McNoon-Tariq?
I think if you want to do something like this, like I do buy into the idea that you have only a certain sector of society voting, and that does lead to political parties serving certain interests. And in an ideal world, it would be great to have young people voting in their first elections. But I think that could backfire, like especially under either Labour or Conservative governments, because, I mean, to be honest, they're not very popular with young people at the moment. And
does that matter? Is that backfiring if people are voting for what they want?
I think it might, because they can say the government doesn't serve our interests and now they're forcing us to wait. I think if we want to implement something like this, I mean, I don't disagree with Rick here. You'd have to be very, very careful and do it in a way that doesn't alienate young people.
Michael Yip, you're nodding there then.
I'm nodding because I don't disagree with Rick. But nonetheless, I feel that this should be approached with caution, because ultimately this is a one-off policy that is trying to engender a sort of lifetime habit of voting. I think it's unlikely that it would work, especially if it goes on its own. And it also ignores the real problems of why people don't vote.
Which are what, do you think?
I think fundamentally people lack a human connection between not only the wider political system, but also their elected representatives. And being forced or being compelled to vote in this way doesn't address that problem, although it might be the necessary shock to the system, Rick. So that's why I was nodding my head there.
Rick Edwards.
Yeah, and I also think that actually what is being forced is politicians to engage with young people. And I think, Michael's absolutely right. There is a lack of this connection between the political process and young people. But if you said to politicians, right, 3.3 million first-time voters are definitely going to vote, then they will have to speak to them and they will have to make an effort to go to where they are. And I think that's the change that it would create. And Michael's also right. This isn't a solution that should sit on its own. It can't be done in isolation. You need to improve political education. And crucially, to the previous point about whether young people want to vote for one of the main parties, you have to introduce a none of the above option to the ballot paper, I think, if you introduce compulsory voting.
Why? What difference would that make?
Well, because you can't, if you are going to say, right, you need to go and vote, I don't think you can then say, and you have to vote for one of these parties, because it's entirely legitimate.
But you could go and spoil your ballot paper.
Yes, you could, but that is not seen at the moment as being such a legitimate expression of dissatisfaction. I don't think. I think that often it doesn't get reported. I know that some electoral officers don't even know that they're supposed to count them and just bin them. It's not a formal solution to the problem of people being able to say, do you know what, I want to engage, I am engaged, but none of these candidates are doing the job for me.
What happens if none of the above wins?
So there's a whole host of options of how you structure that. One idea would be that you would trigger in a constituency where that was the case, you trigger an open primary. So you say, okay, we're just going to rerun this election and with new candidates, and then see if we do any better. Effectively, it's a wake up call, isn't it? Yeah.
Rather than the second. Dore McNoon-Tariq, I mean, I presume you are going to vote, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely.
But are a lot of your friends not planning to?
Well, some people, they don't vote. It's because, well, they don't know how to register. It's like there's not enough awareness about like how to vote, even though it's quite a simple process. It's just that apathy, and it's not like they don't care or anything. It's just that like they're not bothered by it. Like most people don't even understand, I think, politics and how politics works in the country.
Michael Yip, is it the same for you?
Yeah, a lot of the people that I speak to just say, "Oh, I don't care," or I don't really know what's going on." And in this way, another reason why I'm quite cautious about this is because it could sort of engender this sort of slapdash attitude towards politics, where it's sort of seen as being conscripted for national service in a way. You just want to get it over and done with.
So what, you go into a booth, you put a cross against and next to anything?
I think you're opening a bigger risk to that.
But then I think that the problem you get into is what you're saying is that you want to have informed voters, right?
Oh,
And if you get into that, I think you're in very dangerous territory.